Good morning, everybody, and welcome so much to this eMarketer Academy webinar on quite a different topics than we normally cover, namely Excel. I am thrilled to see so many people here today, and it kind of testament that this is a topic that is of interest to a lot of you guys, not necessarily because Excel and Excel skills are in our job description, but because it's such an essential tool for many, many of us. So that is why we are diving into to this topic today. Let us progress here. So we're doing an Excel for Marketeers webinar. I see a lot of people are still signing in, but they can just join in the next couple of minutes while we go through the first practicalities here. I want to make sure that we start on time. My name is Klaus. I'm the product evangelist and head of partner alliances at eMarketer. Like many of you guys, I'm also a marketing practitioner, which means that I'm using tools like eMarketer for my marketing, and we rely a lot on data, right? We need data to conduct our analysis. We need our data to put into our systems, be it marketing platforms, CRM systems. We need data. You know, Excel is one of the first places many of us go with regards to trying to massage our data into something that we can use, and hence that is the topic of today. I think we'll be, well, it's difficult to say today, really, because I've done this webinar quite a long time ago, and I also set 45 minutes back then, but I know that there are probably a lot of questions and challenges coming my way today. So I'll say that I think we'll be around 45 minutes to an hour. I can definitely stay on a bit longer if there are more questions, but let's shoot for the 45 to 50 minutes and see where that takes us. You can submit your questions anytime in the questions box on your left or right-hand side of the screen there in the GoToWebinar panel. There's a questions box. Just type in your questions there. The other participants can't see it, so don't be shy. Just send your questions my way. What we will be covering today is hopefully you'll learn some smart tips and tricks in Excel that helps you turn what I call garbage data into good data and save you from spending a lot of time doing manual repetitive work. So that is really the gist today. So this is not an Excel black belt ninja, I'll teach you how to do long macros and Visual Basic scripting kind of webinar. So if you're really, really good at Excel, you'll probably know all of this stuff already, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff here as well. So this is kind of not beginner level, but you know, I'm not gonna give you the expectations of you'll be fully fledged in doing Visual Basics scripts and macros after this webinar. So I just want to make sure that we kind of align our expectations here. We won't really be looking at eMarketer, the platform, either. Obviously, if you have some questions that relate to data and eMarketer, we can definitely go into that as well. So just let me know what you think in the questions box there. And along the way, send me your headaches, right? If you do things in Excel that just, you know, are blowing your mind, or are really repetitive or takes a lot of time, and you have this feeling in your gut, this could be done in a smarter way. I'm not saying I can solve it, but do send it my way in the questions box, and I can have a go at it during the webinar, or at least give it a crack after the webinar. So your inspiration or your ideas is really what could drive a lot of this conversation as well. So do send me your challenges, and I promise I'll try to solve them if they aren't too hard for me as well. And we won't talk about eMarketer today so much, but for those of you guys who do not know us, I'm just going to briefly mention that we are a marketing automation platform that caters to a lot of different marketing projects and a lot of different organizations. You have all these different tools in the toolbox: email editor to newsletters and drip campaigns, web form for your website, surveys, mobile marketing, SMSs, mobile apps, landing pages, event management capabilities, extensive reporting and dashboarding, automation to tie everything together in one big platform, right? So if you can do the newsletter, you can do all of the rest because it's the same tools you use. So that's where we're coming from. We're a Swedish company, been around since 2002. And you may wonder, so if you're a marketing automation platform and you have nothing to do with Excel per se, why are you doing a webinar on Excel? Well, I already touched upon this a little bit. Excel really is a pretty central tool to a lot of us marketers. And the reasons are various, but there are some general problems with data. And with data, I mean the contact details we have to do marketing campaigns, the transaction reports and purchase history and whatnot we're looking at to analyze data and make personas and so on. And the problems with data are often that it's not pretty, meaning that the data is not formatted the way we would like. It may not be complete. So we may be missing names or companies or segments, and we may struggle with that. Typically, data is scattered across multiple data sets. So we may get some data from our CRM system and some data from our ERP system or accounting system. And what do we do with these sheets of data that isn't really tied together and neatly organized for us? So, and as a result, a lot of our data is really not ready to be used for our marketing purposes. And then we get to work with the data in Excel. And often that kind of work is quite manual. We find ourselves doing the same things over and over and over again, moving cells from one location to another, or correcting data in fields and doing that basically row by row by row. So it's manual and quite repetitive. And if you start to dig into doing things a little bit smarter and more automatic, it can quickly become a little bit complicated. And I guess for a lot of us, I guess not me, I'm a bit guilty of being quite an Excel geek. It's no one's favorite job to wrestle with data in Excel. So if you can recognize some of these situations or some of these words here, I think you're quite like a lot of the rest of us here. So that is why we're looking at Excel and how to do things smarter there. Okay, so already now let's leave this slide spiel and dive into Excel and get messy with some formulas and some tips and tricks there. And just a reminder, do send me your challenges, do send me your questions in the questions box, and I will kind of peek at the questions during the webinar if things are related to the stuff that I'm going through, or I will try to cover them in the Q&A at the end where we can dive into some of your challenges there. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to Excel. Now, two things. This webinar is recorded, so you can go back and review some of the stuff that we're going through today. And also, I will include this Excel sheet in the event or the webinar follow-up after today's session, because I have included some tips and tricks and some formulas in the different sheets, and you can see the calculations or the formulas I do in the sheet as well. So it may be a good reference that you've seen it on the webinar and that you can actually use my sheet to practice and steal some of my formulas and tricks there. Please steal with pride. So just to let you know that this is coming up so you don't have to jot down so many notes there. So the first thing I want to get out of the way are just some really formula basics. If you're new to doing formulas in Excel, there are a couple of things that we need to know and to learn to make things easier for us. So the first formula we're going to look at, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here, is the sum formula, just because it's so simple and it is pretty straightforward what it does, but it will teach us something about formulas and cell references. So whenever you start a formula, you will start with the equal sign and you start typing your formula, in this case sum, which adds numbers in cells together. As soon as you start typing, you will see Excel suggesting some of the formulas you've recently used or some of the functions it has. And if you can find the formula you're looking for here, you can just click here and you get going. Underneath the cell, it may be a little bit difficult for you to see. You will see some help on the actual formula. You can click the formula name or the function name, and it will bring up help article with examples and videos and even data examples that will explain how the formula works or the function works. So if you're not quite sure how to build the function, you can always resort to the help article in Excel. It's pretty good. Well, the sum, as mentioned, it sums the cells. So what I need to have the function here, and then I need to select my two cells, B9 and C9, end the parentheses and hit enter. And then it obviously sums the two cells, right? When you click the formula, you can see which cells it refers to. Now, there are some neat things when you have a formula, and that is you can copy a formula. So if you copy and paste, Control C, Control V, you copy your formula. And the smart thing is that the references are following along. So it is now referencing the two cells next to it. I can also, in the small corner here, there is a dot in the green corner, I can drag my formula down, which will then copy the formula and the cell references will follow, right? So that's pretty cool. There's some other things that I can do. I can also double click in the corner. So this data set is not very long, but if I double click, it will copy the formula all the way to the end of the data set, which is really a time saver instead of manually copying or dragging if your data set is very long. So just double clicking, I'll just show that then, just double clicking this corner down here copies the formula all the way down. Now, there's something about cell references that is important, and that's why I've put the $sign up here. You see, when I double click here, I can see B9 and C9. If I put a $sign in front of either the letter, which responds to the column here, or the number, which is the row, if I put a $sign there, it will make the reference absolute, which means that it won't move with my cell. And what does that mean? Let's say you can see the fees here, they're all the same, right? So if I wanted all of the formulas to take the number in column B and plus the value in C9, obviously I wouldn't like that reference to keep moving because these other fields would be empty, right? So right now, as you can see, it's copies an empty field or sums an empty field. So if I make this cell reference absolute, that is the C9, I put $1 in front of the C and I put $1 in front of the 9, and then copy my function, you can see it constantly refers to the, sorry, I must have done something wrong there. It constantly references that cell. So it continuously links to that cell plus that cell, which is pretty smart. Okay, so now that we know about cell referencing and dragging and dropping, we can move into some of the things that we can do with our functions and our formulas. The first thing I want to look at is formatting text to make it look like I want it to when I'm using, for instance, contact details and similar emaar campaigns. So here's a data sheet I have. This could be from a booking system or an accounting system or wherever. I have a background in the travel industry many, many years ago, and for some reason our back office systems always capitalized all the fields there. That was the standard there. And obviously, if I want to use like the first name and the last name in an email and say, dear first name, you know, having everything in caps is kind of like shouting. So I'll say, hey, dear Amanda, which would be weird. So I would like to make sure that these are properly formatted with capital first letter and small trailing letters. And you can use some of the functions. I've mentioned them up here. They're called proper, lower, and upper. And these are really functions that format text. So let's have a look at the first one, which is proper. So I'm going to say equals proper, parenthesis, and then point to the text that I want to format properly and close the parentheses. Now, as you can see, it formats the text so it capitalizes the first word, the first letter, and then the rest are small. And I can now drag this to the last name, and I can double click here to copy it. And now you can see I've properly formatted all of my names here to look a lot better than these caps. Now imagine if you'd started retyping all of these names. This is a huge time saver if you know the proper function for that. The email here is also all in caps, and I guess that would work, but I would like to have them in small, in lower letters or lower caps instead, because that just looks more like an email to me. So I can use the lower and point to the text and enter parentheses. And as you can see, they're all now in small letters. And you guessed it, there's also a function called upper in case you actually need all of the words, all of the letters in caps. I'm going to do this with company name. Now it formats the company name to be all caps. And as before, I can select the two fields, double click the corner to copy everything down. So I went from a data set that wasn't quite ideal for what I wanted, namely the personalization using maybe first name and last name. Now I have usable first name and last names. I have email addresses that are all in caps and company names that I, for some reason, wanted in all caps. But you get the idea. Formatting text using proper, lower, and upper makes it quite easy for you to make your inputs there look good. There's something about the proper that you won't really see here, but let's say I had the first name and last name in one field. So I'm just going to copy Perez here and put Amanda Perez in this one. You can see the proper function actually capitalizes just the first letter of any word, right? So if I have first names and last names in one column, the proper function would still work to make them look good in that one column. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so that is using proper, lower, and upper to format your text. Another classical problem or issue when you get your data is that the data is not quite organized in your sheet as you would like it to. So I'm going to move to the next sheet here and look at a classic scenario here. Here's maybe data from my CRM system that spits out the names in one column, right? So they're not separated in two. And obviously, when I do emails and personalization, for instance, or even letters or direct mailings, I would like to have the names separate. Maybe I want to say, Dear Amanda or Dear Mrs. Perez or whatever it is that I want. I need the names in two columns. Luckily, there's an easy way to do that. The first thing I do is I copy the lot of names here. By the way, there's a trick when you navigate around your data set. If you, on your Mac, use the Command key and your arrows, or on your PC, use the Control key and your arrows, you can jump to the bottom and the top of your data set, and also to the left and to the right of your data set. So if I'm up here, hit Command right arrow, I jump all the way over here. If I'm here and put Command down arrow, I jump all the way to the bottom. This is pretty neat because I can combine that with the Shift key, Command, Shift, and down, and I have that entire row selected. I don't need scrolling. Okay, so that was just a bit of navigation. I'm going to copy this lot and paste it over here. And what I'm going to use is a function called text to columns. So I'm going to select my column here. And then in the data menu up here, you will find text to columns. Text to columns, well, it actually explains what it does. It translates text into different columns, right? So when you click here, you will have the wizard here saying, okay, what decides when the text should break into different columns? You can have delimited or you can have fixed width. You will most often be using the delimited. That means that it'll be looking for a character in your text string that separates the different columns. So I'm going to go next here, and you can see the different delimiters that are standard. And I'm going to choose space. And I have a preview of my data, right? There's a space between the first name and the last name. And if I tell Excel to treat space as a field delimiter, it will break the field or the column into two fields. There you go, Amanda Perez. There's no space after Amanda now, and there's no space before Perez. It has actually taken the space here and made it the delimiter between the fields. So quite easy to pull the first name and last name and part into two fields there. So copy into a new column here and use the text to column. Now it may be difficult to remember where all of these functions are in the menus, and I can just briefly mention that in the help menu up here, you can search for things that you know are there, but you can't quite find. So for instance, if I start typing text to column, text to column, and I mouse over, Excel will actually show me where that function is in the menus, right? So if I can't quite find it, just go to the help and search for the function, and typically that will help you make the function peek out. All right, so that was splitting data into columns from individual text strings. Next up, we will look at joining data into a text string, but that may be a quite good thing to be able to do as well. So here you can see I have a list of email addresses, and what I want is I would like to have a URL or a link to that person's website. So maybe I want my sales team to do some research on the companies, or I want to have a data source that I can upload into my CRM or into my marketing system, but I would really like the URL here. Now, as you can see, the domain is part of the email address, obviously, so I already have a good chance here of doing that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to split this column into two columns. just like I did before. I'm going to use the text to column. And then instead of the space being the delimiter, I'm going to use the at or the alpha. Right? So now it separates the first part of the email from the domain and top level domain. And now I have the company domains here. Now it's still not quite a URL that you can click on. I would like a www or HTTP or something like that in front. And I can do that with two different functions, either the concatenate function or using the and sign, the ampersand. I'm going to show you both. So in this case, I'm going to use the concatenate, which is concat, and then the first text that I would like. And in this case, I'm going to do quotation and then type http://www dot, right? Because that's the beginning of a URL. And then semicolon, and then the next text, I'm going to point to the domain and end my parentheses. So I'm telling Excel, put together http www dot and the value in B7. There we go. And then I can copy down. And now I have a neat list of URLs from the email domains that I can use pretty quick. I can use the ampersand for the same thing. Like when you plus, we have the value 21 and 23, and I want to plus these two, I'm going to do that cell plus that cell, right? So with numbers, I use the plus sign to join them together into a new value. But with text strings, I can use the ampersand. So I can do the same thing here. I'm going to say, I would like http://www dot and this one. There we go, same result. So the concatenate the concatenate function has some more bells and whistles that you can look up in the help feature. The ampersand is just really a quick way of doing the same thing. So there are two different ways to do that. I just wanted to mention both. I kind of prefer the ampersand because it's so logical. I'm just saying this value and that value, and it'll join it together. If you would like, for instance, in the case before, let me see, where I separated, where I had first name and last name in one column. Let's say it was the opposite. I had first name, last name in two columns, and I would actually like them in one column, like full name. So this was the data I had, and I would like to join it in full name. I could do the same thing. I can point to that one and that one, but I guess you can already see what the problem will be here. It's going to put Amanda Perez in one. But I can type in more things here. So I can say, okay, I would like C6 and quotation mark, space, quotation mark, and D6. So I'm telling the formula that value plus a space sign and that value. And now, lo and behold, I have first name, space, last name. So you can use cell references like here, C6 and D6, and you can type in things in quotation mark and even spaces to make your field look just like you want it. All right, I hope that that is useful. Let me know in your questions box if you have questions or challenges for me. Okay, let's look at another text formatting or string formatting feature that I really like. It's the trim feature. In some cases, your data will be typed in manually in a CRM system, for instance, or maybe in a web form where customers have typed in. And sometimes you will see these trailing, I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. You will see that there are some leading spaces or maybe some trailing spaces after values, right? And you can see here I've got a couple of spaces before the company name. And that doesn't look pretty. And it also means that if I merge this field into an email or into a direct mailing, I'm not quite sure where the name starts, if there are trailing spaces before or after. So if I wanted to put a text string before, like, I hope my product would be suitable for company name. If I've got a couple of trailing spaces either before or after, it will look odd in my mail or in my direct mail that I'm doing. So I can use the trim feature to trim away or cut away leading and trailing spaces. So if I do trim and point to my field and close the parentheses, you can see that the leading space in front of ACMA has gone. And I'm going to copy that, and you can see here, Tessier, I can see all of the leading spaces, and it's difficult obviously to see trailing spaces, but leading and trailing spaces will be trimmed out when you do this feature. So the trim feature, the trim function is pretty neat in cutting away that blank space that you don't want. You can also slice and dice fields using some other functions called left and right. And like I mentioned here, or right here, these features return the number of characters either from the left or the right that you would like to have. So in this case, for instance, I've got the zip codes. They are a merge of the state and the zip code. And in my case here, I would like the state in one field and the zip code in another field. Now, I can't use this text to column because I don't really have a delimiter. I don't have a character that's the same that tells me where to delimit these fields. So what I'll do instead is I'll use the left and right. So in this case, to get the state, I would like to have the two leftmost characters in my field, right? So I'm going to go left, then point to the field, and then a semicolon, and then the number of characters from the left that I would like. 1, 2. There we go. Copy that down, and I've got the abbreviation for all of the states. Now all I need is the zip code, and for that I'm going to use the right function, which does exactly the same. Point to the zip code, and I get to choose how many characters from the right I would like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it gives me the 5 rightmost characters in the text string. There we go. Double click to bring those two columns together. And now I have split the zip code into two fields using the left and right functions. And I've done away with all the leading and the trailing spaces using the trim function. Okay, so that concludes the section here on formatting or making your data look good, making sure that the lower and upper cases are as you want it to, making sure that you can split text into different columns if you need, how you can join text into columns, trimming and cutting data into separate fields using the left and right. All right, so here's a question from Hannah. When using left, how do you recommend to get the text from a URL if the number of characters differ in the list? Hannah, I think what you are asking, keep me honest here, I think what you're asking is, what if it's not nice like this one where it's always 2, right? What if some had 3 and some had 4 and some had 5? I can't use the left and right because it is actually asking me for a specific number of characters that I would like. If it's a URL you would like to split, you could maybe look for something that would be a good delimiter. Like in a URL, you typically have dots, right? Full stops. So you could search for full stops if you want to exclude domains, for instance. You could search or you could split cells into columns using the full stop or the dot as the delimiter. So that's one way of doing that. Here's another question from Ole, classic one. Thanks for bringing it out, Ole. How would you solve splitting first name and last name using text to column if the person has several first or last names? Great question, Ole, and that is very, very typical. Now, demo data like this is always nice and pretty because I've just chosen first name, last name. But what Ole is asking is obviously things aren't always that pretty. So let's look at an example where I split into different columns here. And in this case, I would only have first name and last name. But let's do a couple. And it's funny you should mention Ole because you actually have more names, so you maybe know all about this. But let's do myself. I'm Klaus Niering Frolle. That's my full name. And we may have Louise Hansen underneath, and then we might have Paul Hansen Nielsen. So as I split to columns, I guess you can, I'm just going to move this a little bit down so we can see what's going on here. As I split to columns using space as the limiter, a couple of things will happen, as you can imagine. So let's start doing that first. Text to columns using space as the delimiter. Some names will be in 2 columns, Louise Hansen, and some names will be in 3 columns, Klaus Nearing Trolle. So there are a couple of things that you could do here. What I would do is I would sort this data based on the rightmost field, because you may have somebody with even more names, right? And they would go all across several columns here. But what I would do is I would sort to get all of the names that have values in C and then values in B. So I have the longest names at the top and the shortest names at the bottom. So let's start by doing that. So I'm just going to do this and then sort there. So now and imagine there are many, many, many more, right? So now I have at the top all of the names that have that have more than 2 names, if you will, a first name and a family name. And then later down, I have the names that are just first name, last name. Then I could do some assumptions here. I can say, okay, data is not perfect, but in 95% of the cases, the name here will be the first name, and the names in the leading, column B, C, D, E will be last names. And then I could join the columns B, C, D into one last name field, right? So in this case, I'd say, okay, the longest name apparently had 2 fields here. I can see that because I'm at the top of my list. And I would then do Hansen and space and that one. And then copy this one down, right? Then you can see, in this case, I get Hansen Nielsen. In this case, I get Nearing Trolle. And in this case, I just get Hansen. So now I can copy this as my last name column instead, right? Obviously, if there is somebody called Marie Louise Hansen, it's not going to be perfect because Marie Louise is probably her combined first name. And in this case, I would have Marie Louise Hansen as last name. So you may want to eyeball that list after you've done this operation, but it is at least a lot quicker to do it this way. So first break them out into as many columns as your names dictate, sort them so that you have the longest names at the top. And what I did there is I just select my fields and sort them ascending or descending. That will either bring all of the empty fields to the top or to the bottom, and then use the and sign, the ampersand, with a space in between to join the additional names together. All right. I hope that kind of answered your question there, Ole. It's not the perfect solution. As mentioned, you do have that challenge there with first and last names, but it is at least a lot quicker than doing the whole list manually. So let me know if that helped you out. All right, so let's move on. Where did we go to? We ended up on the trim. Yeah, we ended up trimming. Oh, by the way, now that we're on the case here, Ole, you may want to trim this field when you're done. Because in this case, we've actually joined Hansen and an empty field, including a space in between. So you may want to use the trim feature at the very end, or the trim function, to make sure that you haven't yourself added any leading spaces to the names. So that's a possibility you can do as well. Okay, moving on. We are going to look at lookups. And this is where a lot of people kind of have a little bit of a sweaty palm situation going on, because it's a little bit long-winded or can be a little bit complicated. But bear with me and look at the examples I've put up here. It is definitely doable, and it is super, super powerful when you have disjoint data sets. So by disjoint data sets, I mean that you have parts of your data in one data sheet, like in this case, I've got company names, zip codes, and state, but I don't have the state name. And then I have another table, it's called US states, where I have all of the abbreviations for the states and all of the states' names. And obviously I have the data I need over here. I have the abbreviations and names, but I have the state abbreviations over here, and I would like names. What you can do here is you can use a function called lookup. And what lookup basically does, it asks you, okay, which value would you like me to look up? In this case, state. Okay, I'm looking for CA. Where should I look for CA? Well, I would like you to look for CA in this US states table. And when you find CA, it basically just goes down from the top. There's CA. I can tell it to return the column next to it instead. Okay, so that is what we're going to do. So bear with me as we go along. The formula or the function is called VLOOKUP, and it stands for vertical lookup. Okay, so the first thing it asks me is the value I would like to look up, and that is that one. Okay, and then semicolon. Where would you like to look for this value? It then asks me. That's what's called the table array. Well, the values are over here, and they are in column A and B, right? I've got these ones, and I would like some values from this columns returned. Okay, then the next thing it asks me is what number in the table you just gave me would you like to return? What number of column? This is always column 1, and this is always column 2. So I'm going to put 2. And then it asks me how I want to look up. Either I can put true, which will give me the closest match, which is okay if it's numbers, for instance. If I've got 99 and it can't find 99 in the table, but 100, it can return the value that corresponds to the closest match. Or I can do false, which gives me the exact match, which is quite often what you would like to use. In this case, definitely, I don't want the approximate match. I would like the exact match. And then I'm going to end my parentheses. So let's just look at the formula here. I'm saying vertically look up C8 in the US states, column A and B. When you find my value CA, return the second column with an exact match. And then, as you know, I can copy, and I've got all of my states listed next to the state abbreviations. So that's vertical lookup. It looks for a field or a value in a table and can return it with a value from the same row from a specific column that I specify. So this is really, really powerful if you want to join information like this. But it could also be where you have customer IDs or email addresses or anything like that, where you have data from one sheet that contains some information and data in another sheet that contains some other information. Let's look at this example here, which is also going to be using the vertical lookup or the VLOOKUP. In this case, I've got first name and last name, email address, and I've got the customer ID. So it's a customer number. But I don't have the company name, and I don't have the account manager or the sales rep first name and last name. So, and then in another data sheet, I have all of my companies, all of my customers. I have their customer number, I have the company name, and I've got the sales reps first names and last names. So obviously I would like to join these two so that my sheet here becomes complete, so I can upload it into my marketing platform or CRM system. And again, I will use the lookup to look for a company number. So I'm going to do the same, vertically look up this value in my companies sheet. And I'm going to include all of the fields here. And return to me, when you find the customer number, return column 2, which is the company name. Clearly, I did something wrong. I forgot the false. And I misspelled the function. By the way, it's going great. Let me just redo that one more time. So I'm sure. So I'm going to do VLOOKUP, my value, my table array, second column, and an exact match. Okay, there we are. So I'm good. Acme Corporation. That's pretty nice. Now, as you can see, I would like to have the rep's first name and last name as well. So I would like to be able to drag this formula along. But remember, when you drag along, your reference here also is moved. So in this case, I'm going to say to Excel, when I move my formula around, please make the column sticky, right? So I put a $sign in front of D, which makes the column here sticky. So as I drag along, there we go. it still looks for this value. Now you can see my columns over here, they also change. In this one, I had A and D, but when I drag it along, it goes to B and E. Well, that's no good. I want to have those fixed as well. So I can say $A, $D, and then drag along. There we go. Now all I need to change, I can drag that one step further actually. And then I need to change the cell that it brings back. In this case, it was cell 2. Now I want the rep first name and last name. Let's see what numbers they are. So this is 1, 2. So that would be cells 3 and 4 in my columns here. So I'm going to go in here and change this to number 3 and number 4. All right, so now I can copy this lot down, and Excel will bring back the company name and the sales rep first name and last name from my companies table. And now I have something that could be uploaded into my marketing platform, for instance. I could personalize, Dear Amanda, I hope that things are going great for Acme Corporation. Best regards, Jonathan Bennett, your sales rep. So I could really customize this email using these data that I have now joined from 2 different data sheets using the VLOOKUP. All right, so there we go. That is how you use the VLOOKUP for returning values from another table where it can find a key or a unique number there. And you can also see how I made the references sticky by using the $signs. So as I drag the formula along, the cell that I'm looking for is sticky, and also the table that I'm looking in is sticky. And then all I need to do is change the index number of the column that it is returning to me as I go along. Right? So it may be a little bit intimidating, but have a look at the formula, have a look at the description up here, and even, you know, you can always click the formula to get some, or the function to get some help on what Excel would, how Excel explains the formula. This will help you save a lot of time and do operations across data sheets that would be pretty complicated to do otherwise. All right, so let's move on to the next question here, or the next area. It is using if and functions to do logical tests in your data. This is a little bit like programming to me. I'm a noob when it comes to programming, obviously, so I wouldn't venture into that. But it can help you do a little bit of comparison and logical tests in your data set. So for instance, in this case, I've got companies, I've got industry, customer categories, I've got budget and turnover. And what I would like to know is if my customers are above or below budget. And maybe I can use that for segmentation and profiling. So in this column, I would like the customers that have performed over budget to be rising stars, and the ones that are below budget, I would like to have mentioned as laggers, for instance. And I can use the if sentence or the if function for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do equals if, and then it asks me for what kind of test is it that you would like to do. I would like to see if budget is lower than turnover, right? So D10 is lower than E10. If that's the case, then I put a semicolon and I get to put in the value if this test is true, rising star. And after the semicolon, I get to input the value if the test is false, lagger, and parentheses. Okay, so it puts rising star because the test is budget lower than turnover. Is that true? Yes, it is. Then it puts rising star. And then if I copy it down to this one where the turnover is less than the budget, it will say lagger. And then I can obviously just copy that down, and it has told me very easily if my what the profile of the customer is using the if And you can see the kicker here is really the logical test you put in the first piece here. And it can really be a lot of different things. Right here, I'm comparing it to cells. I'm comparing one cell to another. It could also be that I'm saying, is the turnover higher than 500? So I can put in a specific value. That would also be possible. So I can put in text and values, and I can compare cells using the if function there. So that's pretty powerful. Now, sometimes doing a logical test on just two different fields here and comparing them isn't enough. Sometimes you want to have several things tested to meet your criteria in your if statements, and you can combine it with the AND function. Okay, so what you're telling emaar here, if this and this is true, then I want to output one value, and if it's not true, output another value. So in this case, I would say, okay, now I've got the profiles on the individual ones. But what I really want to keep a look out for is if any VIP customer like this one is below budget. That's critical, right? A VIP customer that's below budget, I want to have critical in the status out here, and I can use the AND formula or the AND function for that. So I'm going to go with if, and now I want two things to be true. So I'm putting AND. The first test is still that now in this case, the turnover should be less than the budget. And the other thing I would like to test is if the category is VIP customer. Okay, so now I've got my two criteria. If they're both true, so that the budget is higher than the turnover is lower than the budget and the category is customer, I would like to put critical in there. And if the value is false, I don't care. I don't care about the customers that are below budget, so I don't want to put anything in that cell. And then as I copy this down, it should test critical, it says, because in this case, the category is VIP customer and the turnover is lower than the budget. So as you can see, I can combine in the if function here, I can combine different tests. I'm testing for two things. I'm testing for the turnover and budget cells, and I'm testing the category cell, whether that equals VIP customer. If both these things are true, it will put out critical, and if they're not, it will put out nothing, or anything else I would like to put in there. So that is how you can combine your checks or your logical tests using the AND feature there. I hope that makes sense. I will, as mentioned, keep the values, the formulas in here and the examples up here so you can play around with these features. The last bits I want to go through has to do with organizing and analyzing your data. Maybe you're looking at creating some customer profiles, customer personas, or you're looking at how reps are performing or how your adverts are performing, and you've got the data on that, and you want to look at that and do some analysis. The first and easiest way to start some analysis on your data set, in this case, I've got order dates, regions, sales reps, products, units, cost, and total. So this is really transactions with the sales reps assigned to them. The first quick analysis you can do is by using filters, and you will find the filter function up here, and you can add this filter. That will give you small drop downs on all of your column headings. So let's say I want to have a look at the central region. I can click the little arrow here and just select the central region, and the rest are filtered out. You can see the numbers over here, they're now blue, and it indicates that there are rows that are filtered out. So now I have all the data for the central region, and maybe I just want to have the pen sets sales. There we go. So now I've drilled down on my data set. The rest is still behind the scenes here, but I've drilled down my data set very quickly to look at central sales, pen sets only. If I want to clear the filter, I just go into the different ones and say clear, and the region as well, clear, and I'm back to where I started with my original data sets. Filters can be used for a lot of different things. You can sort, and you can, as mentioned, you can drill down and filter out the different data sets that you want to have. So quick and easy to do that. So I want to do just see pen sales. There we go. And I could select and copy here into another data set where I need to do further analysis there, and it will copy just these cells for me. Okay, so that's using filters. That's the first step in drilling down and focusing in on specific items in your data. Another way, and much more powerful, is called pivot tables. And a lot of people shy away from pivot tables because they can seem a little bit complicated, but they are incredibly powerful. And I encourage you to play around with them because it can't hurt, right? Can't damage your data. So using a pivot table, the first thing you need to do is you need to select all of the data that you would like. I'm going to use Command A or Control A that will select all of the data in this data set where I'm currently positioned. And on the data menu point, you will find Summarize with Pivot Table. Okay, it asks me, is this the data you would like? Yes, it is, because that's the data I chose. And it creates a new worksheet. I'm just going to zoom in here. Creates a new worksheet for me. So I have now an empty sheet, and I can pull in my names or my fields into my pivot table. So here I have my fields. These are my columns from the table before: region, rep, item, units, cost, and total. So these were the ones I had over here, right? So these are my headings. So this is basically just the labels of the data that I have. And now I can pull these labels into my table. So for instance, if I would like to have region in the rows here, and total sales in the values. Then it quickly summarizes the regions and the total sales volumes per region. I can then do several layers in the rows if I want. So I can pull the reps. I simply click and pull the reps into the rows, and the table is expanded. And now I have region, sales rep, and the individual sales rep revenue, as well as the total revenue in the region, right? So pretty powerful stuff going on rather quickly. Obviously, it is just Excel, so I can format. So let's say I wanted to have currency here. Let's say I wanted to sort so that the top salesperson is on top here. So I can see that Mr. Kibble has the highest total sales in the central region here. I could split this even further because I also have the columns fields that I haven't used yet. So I could take the item and drag that into columns. And now I can see region, sales rep, and product type. I can collapse, so I get back to my region view, and I can expand again here. So as you can see, pretty quickly, you can come up with some rather advanced or multidimensional analysis or opportunities for analysis using the pivot table. Now, sometimes you will end up dragging a field into where it doesn't belong, and all of a sudden your table goes haywire. Now, keep in mind, the data behind all of this is still intact, right? So my order data sheet, nothing has happened over there. It is still looking dandy. So I shouldn't be afraid of messing up anything. If something goes haywire, I can just take my field and drag it out from the pivot fields, and then it will disappear, and I can rebuild what I was doing. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions around the pivot tables, and I'll just continue with a few more examples here. Now, as you can see, I've pulled the total in here, and it obviously does a total or sum of the totals. I can pull the same field in several times. So I'm going to pull in totals, and now it does the same thing again. And down here, there's a small I next to my field. If I click that I can change the operation, the mathematical operation here. So now it does a sum, which is fine, but maybe I want to do an average. So just by doing that, I now have the sum of total sales, and I have the average sales size as well in the central region. I can do the whole thing again, pull that in, click the I, and make it do a count instead of a sum. So now it tells me that in the central region, we had total sales of just over 11,000 pounds. The average deal size was 464, and it is a total of 24 sales. So pretty quickly, I can come up with a lot of information using the pivot table. What is also pretty neat is this pivot table I can click. So let's see, I wanted to dive into the central region here and see everything that's behind this figure. If I double click this figure, a new sheet will be created with the data that matches that criteria. So central region in this case. Remember, the original data set is still intact. This is an additional new sheet that I can delete, and my original data sheet will still be intact. So you can really drill down your data using the pivot table there, which is very, very powerful. All right, we are almost at the hour. Let me know if you have more questions that are coming up. Some people have to leave for another meeting. That's totally understandable. I will keep plowing through, so keep the questions coming. If you need to drop off, you can always revisit the recording where additional tips and tricks may be shared depending on what questions come in. So see you at another time, June. I hope you like the webinar so far. Let me know if you have more challenges coming your way in the questions box. Just briefly, before everybody leaves, I'll just a quick reminder, we have an upcoming webinar next week on June 11th on the brand new campaign reports that eMarketer that we just launched. I will go through how to set up the campaign reports and come up with some useful examples of how campaign reports can be used for different types of marketing campaigns. So a quick tutorial there on how campaign reports work. I just wanted to mention that before everybody drops off for another meeting. Let's see. Some feedback from Christina. Good information, very informative. You're welcome. You're welcome, Lynn. Asking about the recording. Keep the questions coming. The recording will be sent to your email, Lynn. So just sit tight and I will send you a recording. It may be an hour or more since my webinar platform needs to make everything neat and dandy there and then spit out the video, and I will share the video along with the Excel sheet there for you to reference. All right, thank you for all the positive feedback. Really cool. I hope I saved you some time and cut away with some of the manual tasks that you're doing in Excel. Here's a question from Josephine. Is it possible to get a sort of short command fact sheet for all the commands? I'll see what I can find, Josephine. The trick is, if you're talking about the features that, the functions that I used in Excel here, I don't know how many functions there are in Excel. It's probably in the thousands. So the most common ones, which are those? It's a good question. I'll see what I can find and share that with the group later on. What I think I'll dig out, because that's also very useful, Josephine, is shortcuts. Like selecting everything in a table, maneuvering quickly around in a table instead of just scrolling up and down. Some of these shortcuts and commands, see what I can find. I'm pretty sure Google can assist me there in digging up something that's good, and I will share that with a lot. Thanks for that question, Josephine. Here's a question from Christina. Is it possible to import a contact list from Excel to eMarketer and to import it into several lists at the same time? I'll do a sample import in just a sec, Christina, but the short answer is you can, when you import to eMarketer, you can just have one list as your destination, and then those contacts would end up on that list. And then you would have to use filters and some bulk actions to put them onto other lists. So you can't have several lists as your destination when you import contacts, Christina. I'll do a quick import in just a sec to eMarketer so we can see what I mean. Here's the question from Jeanette. I don't even have a $sign on my keyboard. I'm sure that it's there somewhere, Jeanette. Depends on what computer you're on, obviously. If you're on a Mac keyboard, it's the top leftmost key on your keyboard. I really can't remember where it is on the PC, but I'm pretty sure that it's somewhere there. It's pretty useful in Excel for sure. Okay, I know that we're at the hour. I'm going to continue as long as the questions are there. Keep them coming, and if you leave, just catch up on the recording, and I'll see you at another time. Christina, I'm going to dive into the import as you asked about in eMarketeer, and also actually want to show you how you can make some of this data fit into eMarketeer, because in this case I have my my upload data here. I've got first name, last name, email, all of the standard stuff, but I've also got some fields like rep first name and last name. So this could be the sales rep. I've got industry and I've got customer category, and I want to make room for that as well in eMarketeer, right? And these are not standard fields in eMarketeer. So first of all, I want to make room for those, and then I want to upload my data. So in eMarketeer, I'm going to go to my account page, and I'm going to go to my customize eMarketeer. So if you've never seen eMarketeer, don't worry too much. This is a quick operation. I'll just show you how to customize the database that you have available in eMarketeer. We call that the contact card, which is basically, this is the contact card, or the place where you house data on your contacts. So you would have, you know, your name fields, you would have your company fields, and so on. And you also have the ability to add more fields. So I'm going to add a new group here. I'm going to call that profile. And then I'm going to add a few fields that matches my data. So like rep first name and rep last name, these two I would like to have. So I'm going to add field. I'm going to add text field called rep first name. I'm going to add a text field called rep last name. There we go. So now I have these two. So I can merge that into my data sets and into my campaigns. I'm going to add another field called category. I'm going to click add field. I'm going to choose a drop list for this one. I'm going to category, and I'm going to paste in my options. There we go. Then you see I have a category field with a drop down of my different customer category or industries. And I've got industry. Actually, I would like to rename this one. I can see that so this one should be industry. Save. And one more field. In this case, I would like to do a radio button, and that one would be category. And my categories would be lead customer and VIP customer. There we go. So now I've created new fields in the eMarketeer contact card, which means that the database is essentially expanded with my new fields, and I can upload data into these new fields, and I can merge these new fields into my campaigns as well. So I'm going to go to contacts. I'm going to go to import contacts. I'm going to choose file upload. And then I'm going to choose Excel. Then I am going to take my data from Excel. I've got first name, last name, email, customer, all of this stuff. Copy the whole thing, and then simply paste it into eMarketeer. Now, this may look kind of ugly and messy, but as soon as I click next, eMarketeer will recognize the columns from Excel. It will look for the column headings and see if it can match the fields automatically to my eMarketeer database. You can see it matched first name to first name, email. This one it couldn't find, so I'm going to choose external ID. That's the customer number, company name, rep first name, last name, industry, and this one would be category, obviously, and this one would be industry. No. The other way around, industry and category. There we go. So you can see I now have the fields from my data sheet. I can import it into eMarketeer. I can update on email addresses, and I can add to a list. And this is back to your question, Christina. I can only choose one list here. I don't need to put them into a list, but I can. And I'm going to use the new contact list in this case. I can obviously create new lists as well, and I can update the legal basis when I import. I'm not going to do that at this point. So it imported 50 new contacts to emaar tier, and they will now be available in here in my database. I can then select the list that I put them into, new contact lists. And from here, Christina, you could bulk action them into another list. So add to contact list. So if you need to have them in different lists, you can do that using the bulk action feature and add them to a new list. So you could create a new list that will be customers in industry XYZ, something like that, whatever you would like. And now they would also be in that list. So that's how you would take your newly imported list and put it into different lists in a quick fashion there. Okay, let's see. I hope that answered the question, Christina. He's Hannah asking for more details about the query and the import XML features in Excel. You know, Hannah, I'm glad you're writing for the next time because I will have to read up on those too. Thanks for the inspiration there, and I'm always eager to learn something new. So the query and import XML will be on my curriculum for the next one. Thanks for that. Other than that, there are no more questions at this time. Let me know if you still have something that you're wondering. And if not, I will just hope to see you in an upcoming webinar. As mentioned, we have one of the campaign dashboards coming up on June 11th. And then we may have one more webinar before summer focusing on storytelling and video production. We're not quite sure how that pans out yet, but we have that in the backlogs as well with an interesting partner speaker there. So keep your eye out for the webinars page always on our website. And by the way, if you've missed some of our previous webinars, do know that all the webinars are available on demand. So everything that we've been through during the spring here, you will find in the on-demand webinar section on our website. Okay, no more questions. With that, then I will bid you farewell. Wish you a wonderful day and a sunny weekend. Here from Denmark, at least, it looks like we're going to have quite a splendid weekend when we get to it. Tomorrow's our Constitution Day, so we will celebrate our Constitution. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Bye-bye.